So I made a video on the perfect hunting rifle yesterday, and it went over with pretty good success. There was quite a few people though in the comments talking about the caliber. And I had only covered my newest piece of the pie, because when I select my caliber, it's a pie, and I put all that information together, and then I come up with an answer in the end. And the reason they were asking about this is because I had covered other parts of the pie, like bullet design, kinetic energy, stuff like that in other videos. But I did not talk about it in that video because I had a brand new piece of the pie I was concerned with, feet per second. So, to get the whole story, what I'm going to be doing is putting all that information together from those different videos on how I select my caliber. First things first is the cost of the ammunition. Oh, and remember, this stuff doesn't necessarily apply to you. This is how I select my caliber. So first you got the cost of the ammunition. For me, it must be less than $1 a round. I would like to see it somewhere around 50 cents a round. The reason that is because the more costly the ammunition is, the less likely I'm going to shoot that. Say, for example, I bought a .338 Lapua, $20 a cartridge. Well, shoot it what, maybe 20 times? That's a lot of money. Or no, it's not $20 a cartridge, is it? 2, 4, 6. Yeah, it's like $20 a cartridge. So you're looking at like $100 for 10 rounds. So I'm gonna shoot it like maybe 10 times, and whatever data I've collected and the practice I have gotten from that, I'm gonna call it good. Now you can offset this cost by reloading, but that actually comes into the next point. Availability. The round needs to be available at any Walmart. Now I ran into this problem when I lived in, it was either Illinois or Minnesota. I think it was when I lived in Illinois. I had jumped on the 6.8 SPC bandwagon, which is a great hunting round. The problem is it's a niche round, and it's not available basically at all. So I grabbed my rifle, my magazines, and somehow in all the confusion of having to drive to Wisconsin to go hunting, I forgot the ammunition. So I stopped I realized that basically when I crossed the state line, so I was already like probably 2.5 hours, 3 hours from home, so I'm like, I'm not going back. I stopped at every single place that I could find that sold ammunition, all the way to central Wisconsin. Not a single one of them sold 6.8 SPC. I had no idea how rare the round was because in Illinois it's a different ball of wax. Like the store I was going to was Mega Sports. They had 6.8 SPC right on the shelf, multiple different grains, multiple different types of ammunition. I didn't think it would have been an issue. So when I finally got to Wisconsin, I only had the end of a magazine, which I had because I was trying to shoot competition, and, well, discovered I'm not very good at it, but I did learn some stuff. I strongly recommend shooting competition. But don't expect to be a really good success unless you've been working at it for years. Anybody can do it, you just really have to be able to put in the time. So anyway, the magazine had like 3 cartridges in it. Maybe 5 at the most. I personally, I know there's going to be 100 people in the comments, oh, you only need 1 shot per animal. Yeah, that's all fine and great. What if I run into a black bear? Or maybe a bobcat? You know, there was actually a video, because bow hunters, the scent they used, you were supposed to tie it on a string with a little piece of felt, soak the felt in it, and then walk this way. There was deer urine all the way to your stand, so ideally the bucks would follow that urine and come to your stand. Well, the buck caught up with him before he was in his stand. He was armed only with his bow. I don't know if he actually got mauled to death, but there's a pretty bad beatdown video, and he couldn't do anything about it. All he had was his bow and arrow. What if I only had 1 shot? What if I shot a deer, I was going there to clean it, or I started cleaning it, and all of a sudden here comes a black bear because it smelt the meat? No, I like ample ammunition. I will take a full magazine full, 20 rounds. So okay, we got cost and availability covered. That's 2 pieces of the pie that are very important. Cost is huge out of those. It's got to be cheap. You got to be able to shoot the rifle constantly year-round. If you don't shoot your rifle constantly year-round, really you shouldn't be hunting with that rifle. You're just not that experienced with it. At least, maybe once every 3 months, shoot the rifle. That would be adequate. So now you got kinetic energy. You need enough kinetic energy to be able to bust through the ribs, bust through the hide, and make it into the vitals. Regardless how you look at it, a vital hit is a vital hit, and a miss is a miss. You could have a 50 caliber, whatever. We'll go 50 caliber BMG, put it in the dirt. You could have a 22 long rifle and put it in the brain. The 22 long rifle is now a better killer than the 50 cal because you missed. And you can't say that, you know, a vital hit from a smaller cartridge isn't going to do it, because I helped somebody. They basically work for a rendering company, and if a cow can't stand, it cannot be sold for human consumption. All we were allowed to have was a 22 long rifle with mini mags in it. A 22 long rifle can take down a cow. Now, we were required to shoot it twice. Obviously, you know, you shot the first one from distance, right between the eyes, that killed it. And then you came up on the side of the head with a second shot just to ensure that you didn't get to the slaughterhouse and the cow decided it wasn't dead enough. So anyway, you got to have enough kinetic energy to bust through the ribs. Now, this is really important if you're starting to shoot at range. Yes, a 223 will be just fine out to 200 yards, but then it's starting to really lack in kinetic energy to be able to get in there and make it into the vitals. So then you're going to want to step up to bigger calibers. I base my kinetic energy rating off of what a customer had told me. I actually trust this guy. I fact-checked a lot of information he told me before, and it's all came up true. Well, his story... So apparently a deer... One second. So his story, apparently a deer got hit by a car. It hit it in the hindquarters, so it just broke the hip. The deer couldn't move except for dragging its front feet. The officer had pulled out a 1911. Supposedly he had asked what ammunition he was using because it failed pretty miserably. Anyway, it was 220 grain Hornady critical defense ammo. And he had shot it, you know, right where the vital should be, allegedly 5 times. Out of those 5 shots, only 50% penetrated. Other bullets that were wedged in between ribs, some broke through ribs. Basically, it caught about 2 of the 5 shots. Didn't let it get into the vitals. So I base my kinetic energy on it's got to have more than a 45 ACP. And this is important, especially if you hunt with like handguns and stuff. Your 45 long Colt, 45 APC, all your slower moving heavy slugs, unless it's got more kinetic energy than a 45 ACP, I probably wouldn't recommend hunting with it. So you're going to want to go to like a 454 Casulla, something like that, that will have enough kinetic energy to get into the vitals. But now kinetic energy is funny this way. Say, for example, you have a slow-moving heavy projectile, and you're able to find an exit wound. That means, depending on the bullet design, it can carry as much as 80% of the kinetic energy with it. So, to put this into perspective, say I shoot a deer with a 308. I find an exit wound. Let's pretend that that particular bullet design, it bled off about 50% of the kinetic energy into the deer. Say I shoot that same deer with a 223 and I don't find an exit wound. The 223 has actually delivered more kinetic energy to that deer than the 308. Now remember though, kinetic energy isn't the overall principle here, because now you have to factor in velocity. Because once you get over 2,200 feet per second, like let's say you were to shoot, I don't know, something around 1,000 feet per second. It don't matter how far over you get over 2,200 feet per second. From what federal ammunition says, you just have to be over 2,200 feet per second. So let's say you shoot something slower than 2,200 feet per second, and it punches through, that kinetic energy is wasted. Not to mention, when they go through, you have a temporary wound cavity, and then it closes. Because your body, or the animal in this case, is able to absorb that shock, the skin can stretch out to that point, and then come back down without permanent damage. Over 2,200 feet per second, because we're made out of 80% water, you get a hydraulic effect, so as the bullet passes through, it pushes stuff out like this. Well, when it's at that velocity, it pushes it far enough to where it exceeds the recovery point. So a temporary wound cavity now turns into a permanent wound cavity. That's what you will see in ballistic jelly and stuff like, let's say you shoot it with a pistol. There'll be a hole in everything, you'll see it bulge out and go back down, but the only real damage is where the slug had actually pushed material through. Shoot that same one with a rifle, it'll bulge out and you'll see ripping and tearing and everything through the ballistic jelly. So now you got to combine kinetic energy with velocity. Myself, and I know you 30-30 guys are just going to freak out in the comments, I wouldn't shoot at a range that brings my rifle below 2,200 feet per second. The reason I said that about the 30-30 is because they're only 2,200 feet per second right at the muzzle. So I'd be like, okay, if my intended range, my maximum range is X amount of yards, I want a cartridge that at that range, it's still above 2,200 feet per second. And still has enough kinetic energy to be over a 45 ACP, so I know I have enough power to get into the vitals. It's a combination thing. Now, bullet design also changes that. The ideal bullet will stop inside the animal. You don't want to be shooting through the animal because, one, you're wasting kinetic energy. Two, what if it were to like hit a rock, take like a 30-degree corner, and go hit a hunter? I know that should never happen because you should never even shoot in the general direction of a person, but it happens multiple times every single hunting season. So it is something to be considered with, or concerned with. So, you got your kinetic energy and you got your velocity. Now you got to worry about bullet design because you want the cartridge to stop inside your animal. My rule of thumb is if I'm hunting and at least 50% of the time or more I can find an exit wound, I want to come down in a caliber because I'm shooting something too heavy, something too hard. I will replace mass with velocity because velocity bleeds off a lot quicker, especially with a quality bullet. Like, for example, that 6.8 I was actually talking about. That's at a higher velocity than an AK, but it still produces the same amount of kinetic energy. It breaks to 2,200 feet per second. So, a 6.8 is likely to stop inside of it because most of its kinetic energy is stored up in velocity instead of mass. I could not find exit wounds when I shot deer with the 6.8, so that would be ideal. That's perfect. I have enough to get into the vitals. It's distributing the kinetic energy and stopping inside of the animal. In AK, I've seen clean shots through and through the animal. Does that mean that's ineffective? No, but that's not my bullet choice. Then the next thing is, what platform would you need to use that particular cartridge? A good example would be 30-06 versus 308. They're virtually the exact same rifle. They're exact same ballistics, I should say. But a 30-06, I'm pretty much going to have to go with like an M1 Garand, a bolt action. All the platforms I'm looking at like 10 plus pounds. Like, for example, this is a 30-06. It's heavy. Now, if I were to opt to go with a 308 instead of a 30-06, now I can go on a lighter platform. Like an AR-10. Or something to that effect. And that'll matter, especially if you like to walk, or they call it stalking when you deer hunt, instead of just, you know, taking a four-wheeler to your stand. The most exertion you're going to apply to yourself is dragging your firearm up the ladder of the stand. Then you're just sitting all day. Then weight doesn't really matter. But if you're walking, you know, your muscles get fatigued, get a bunch of lactic acid in there, trying to aim at a deer, and it's like... So you got to have something light so you don't overexert yourself. So that also matters. You know, what can my cartridge be chambered in? Is it going to be chambered in a realistic rifle? So that's something to think about. Like these. Same exact bullet. This one shoots twice as fast. Well, not quite twice as fast, but almost as fast as this one. This would be ideal through brush in that because its kinetic energy is stored in weight. Yeah, this also has the same amount of kinetic energy stored in weight, but at close range, this is very likely to pop through the animal. A 30-30, you know, it's hit or miss. I've seen a 30-30 go through both sides of the animal. I've seen them stop inside, depending on where you put your shot. Because shot placement is really everything. Now, a 30-30, I have seen someone take a deer at roughly 300 yards with a 30-30, Kent Fish. Was that ideal? No. If he would have got a bad shot, you know, that's a that's different. At 300 yards, I would much rather have this. A 300 Remington short mag. I still wouldn't pick that one out of all the options you can go with, but you know, that is something to think about. I've also had experience with using the wrong bullet tip. For example, I think it was the first year I had my SCAR 17. You know, I'm pretty big on shot placement, and I'm like, oh, hey, you know, who cares? I just need something that is legal to hunt with. And 175 grain Sierra Match King is technically a hollow point, so you can technically hunt with it, even though it's more or less a full metal jacket. And I was like, well, that's what I shot with all year long. That's the cartridge I know, so why don't I just hunt with it instead of getting something different? Because the way the deer was aimed at me, you know, I'm going, in my head is like, okay, go right behind the shoulder. You know, that's your clean shot. But it was kind of aimed at like this, so right behind the shoulder, instead of putting it right here, like if it was quartered off, I wind up just going through the intestines and out the back. Clean shots. The exit wound looked just like the entry wound. No expansion at all on the cartridge. Would I have got it with a more expansive cartridge? I don't know. Because I've also shot deer with a 308 with AMAX bullet, I think it was. Possibly. I don't know. This was a long time ago. But anyway, yeah, I hit those in the stomach, and the deer was tripping over its own entrails trying to run away. So bullet design's going to matter. So, alright, you got your pie, you got cost, feet per second, kinetic energy, availability, will it over-penetrate, and what platform can it fit on? And that's how I would select your cartridge. I would not just go with the biggest, baddest cartridge. I mean, you could. There's no shame in that. You just have to be aware of over-penetration and stuff like that, but for the perfect cartridge, it should have enough kinetic energy to get into the vitals. It should not have too much where it goes through the deer. It should be cost effective. It should be available on a platform you can use for your hunting situation. It should be widely available. You should be able to go into any Walmart and find that cartridge. So anyway, that's just my thoughts. You should watch a bunch of videos on this topic just so you can get the full story. But thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. Leave in the comments below what you hunt with, the success you've had, any personal experiences that might help any viewers shape their ideas of what they should get. Don't forget to subscribe.